You are welcome to the lecture Fundamentals of Web Programming. In this 7th chapter of Basic Design, we will look at page layout basics. Today's lecture on page layout basics will equip you with learning outcomes such as how to configure floats, how to clear a float, how to create two-column page layouts, how to configure vertical navigation in an unordered list, how to configure horizontal navigation in an unordered list, how to add interactivity to hyperlinks with CSS pseudo-classes, how to configure CSS sprites, how to configure CSS for print, how to configure fixed, relative, absolute, and sticky positioning, how to configure stacking order with Z-index, how to configure a hyperlink to a named fragment such as internal to a web page, and finally, how to configure a single page website. Normal flow. Normal flow is the way that elements are displayed in a web page in most circumstances. In the normal flow, block level elements stack on top of one another and inline elements fill the available space. When the browser window is resized, the block elements expand or contract to the new width and the inline content reflows to fit. Normal flow or flow layout is the way that block and inline elements are displayed on a page before any changes are made to their layout. The float property. The float CSS property places an element on the left or right side of its container, allowing text and inline elements to wrap around it. On the other hand, the flex flow property is considered to be a shorthand property for the flex wrap and flex direction properties. This property is one of the CSS3 properties. The flex flow property is used with the WebKit extension for such browsers as Safari, Google Chrome, and Opera. Now let's jump to the code and explore some float properties. I've just created a page for the float property, and starting from the top we have the document type, which is HTML, and I've opened an HTML tag, I've opened a head tag and style tag, and right at the bottom we're going to close in the same order. So first of all we close the style, then the head, but the HTML itself is right at the bottom. That is where we close it. So coming back to the top, we're going to declare some selectors. Here we declare our first selector, we call it IMG because we want to explore float property. So at this point, we assign rights to our IMG float. And next is the body. Here is our body selector. This is where we declare everything that needs to happen in the background, border, and the font, and the padding as well. So we have an image as our background image. We gave the X value for our repeat. We gave 40% for our background size. And for the border top, we gave it 3 pixels. And these are the values of our solid color. For the border top right radius, 20 pixels. We give it area sans serif. And for our background color, we give it these color values. And lastly, for our padding left, we give it 40 pixels. And below that, we have our second body selector. But at this point, I've commented out all these other functions because I'm only interested in floating properties at this point. So I'm only making use of the background color. So for the background color, I've given it these values. So at the end, we close our style and we close our head. As you can see, we open the style from the top and all the way down, and we close the style at this point. So everything in the style tell the body what to do. So let's come over to the body. So here in the body, we open the body tag all the way to the end of it. Okay, what happened in the body? Right here in the body, we have our topic, which is the float property. We have the first paragraph, and we also have the second paragraph. On the second paragraph, that's where we have our image because we want to float our image left or right. Let's jump to the HTML page so we can have a look at our design. Here we are at the HTML page. This is how it looks. I'm going to zoom out so you can see a bit more clearly. So this is how the page looks like. As we said, we have our topic, we have the first paragraph, and we have the second paragraph. But within the second paragraph, that's where we have our float image embedded. I can still zoom out for you to see how it looks like. Okay, let's jump back to the code and make some changes. Okay, let's start with border top. So for the border top, originally we had 3 pixels and we had solid colors of these values. Let's change the 3 pixels, say, to 30 pixels. So we have changed our border top from 3 pixels to 30 pixels. Now let's save the file and jump back to the HTML page. Let's refresh the page and see how it looks like. Now this is 30 pixels border top. We can still adjust the pixel size either to reduce or to increase it. Now let's jump back to the code and see what else we can do. So at 30, we've seen how it looks like. Maybe we can just change it to 70. Let's try 70. Let's save the file and jump back to the code and see how it looks like. So at 70 pixels border top, let's see how it looks like. For another design, we can actually bring in something else here, maybe an advert or some other image to beautify the design. Okay, let's jump back to the code and accept our initial 3 pixels. Okay, we've changed it to 3 pixels. Let's save the file. Okay, let's try and change our font family. Let's change it to impact. Let's save our document and jump back into our HTML page. Let's refresh the page now. So you can see the difference between the impact and the previous font family. Let's jump back to the code and make some more changes. Let's make some changes to our padding on the left. So let's change the padding pixels to 80 pixels. We're saving the file and jumping back to the HTML page. Now we're going to refresh the page. You can see the padding left has shifted a little bit. So initially we had 40 pixels and we've changed it to 80 pixels. So this is how the padding works. So it pads it from the left, it pads it from the top, it pads it from the right, and it also pads it from the bottom. However you want your design to look like, you can use the padding element to reposition your page. Let's jump back to the code and make more changes. As you can see, we have declared another body selector. But within this, we're only making use of the background color. So the background color initially, this is what the background color is. We can make changes such as we can make it a little bit red towards orange. Okay, we're going to save the file and jump back to the page. And we're going to refresh the page. Now the background color has changed to orange, a type of orange color. Let's jump back to the code and make some changes. So we assign the first body selector where we have all our background image, repeat size, background top right radius, font family, background color, as well as our padding left. And we also declare another body selector where we only made use of our background color. And further down, we came to the body to enter the details we would like to see, such as the headings. We have the float property, we give it H1, and we have one paragraph, we have another paragraph. The second paragraph contains the image we want to float either left or right. Now going back to the top, we will actually like to float our image to the left. So right now I'm going to change this right to left. Now I've changed to left and I'm going to save the file and I'm jumping back to the HTML page. Okay, so watch this image floating to the left as I refresh the page. So you can see the image has actually floated to the left. Now let's jump back to the code and make some changes, probably with the padding left. So for the padding left, 80 pixel appeared to be too much for the design we're looking forward to. So let's come back to say 40 pixels. Let's save our document and jump back to the page. And let's refresh the page and you can see it has jumped back to 40 pixels. The clear property. The clear property is useful to clear or terminate a flow values that are left, right, and both. The clear property controls the flow text to floated elements. The clear property specifies what should happen within the element that is next to a floating element. The clear property is directly related to floats. If the element can fit horizontally in the space next to another element which is floated, it will float, unless you apply clear to that element in the same direction as the float. Then the element will move down below the floated element. The overflow property. The overflow property configures the display of elements on a web page. Values such as auto, hidden, and scroll can be used to clear or terminate a float before the end of a container element. The overflow property specifies what should happen if content overflows and elements bump. This property specifies whether to clip container or to add scroll bars when the element's content is too big to fit in a specified area. Note, the overflow property only works for block elements with a specified height. The CSS box sizing property. The CSS box model is a container that contains multiple properties including borders, margin, padding, and the content itself. It is used to create design and layout of web pages. The box sizing property allows us to include padding and borders in an element's total width and height. When you set box sizing, border box on an element, padding and border are automatically included in the width and height. Let's jump to the code and explore some CSS box sizing properties. I have opened another page for our CSS box sizing property. Right from the top, the document type is HTML. So we open a HTML tag, a head tag, and a style tag. And the same way, we close them right at the bottom. So going back to the top, we had a div container selector here. And right within the div container selector, we declared our page width and page border. So for our page width, we gave it 100%. And for our page border, we gave it 2 pixels, solid color of this value. And right below, we opened another div selector box. And right within that, we made some declarations as well, such as box sizing, width, border, and float. So at this point, we want to make some changes. But before then, let's go down a little bit further. We also declared another body selector. Within that, we declared a background color to these values. We also declared our padding left to 50 pixels. We also declared our padding right to 50 pixels. And further down, we declared another body selector. So right here, we assign a style to our fonts. So we close our style, we close our head. Remember, the HTML is the last thing we close because it was the first thing we opened right on top. So let's go back to the body section. In the body, we declared quite a few classes here. So first of all, we want to make use of the class called container that we had right from the top. Here we had a container div, which we assigned 100% width and 2 pixels for the border. Let's jump into the HTML page before we make further changes. Here is the HTML page. As you can see, we had a padding left and a padding right. Let's jump back to the code and make some changes. To start with, okay, let's change the container width to 50% for instance. I'm going to save the file and jump back. We have changed the container width to 50%. Now let's refresh the page. As you can see, 50% actually squashes the text within the container. So 50% is not suitable for this design. Let me even try to zoom in and zoom out. Probably, as we zoom out, it might be suitable on some screens and it may not be suitable for other screens. So let's jump back to the code and change it back to 100%. I'm going to save the file and jump back to the HTML page. Now we've changed it back to 100%. Let's jump back to the code and make some more changes. Our border was 2 pixels and we can change it to 10. Let's try 10 pixels. I'm saving the file and jumping back to the HTML page. And I'm going to refresh the page. Now we've changed the container border to 10 pixels. And you can see how it looks like. I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to zoom out. So you can see how it appears on different zooming levels. So for this page, our topic is CSS box resizing property. So we're actually going to resize the box now. So at this point, the box width is 50%. Now let's try 100%. I'm going to save the file and jump back to the HTML page. Okay, let's refresh the page. So it has changed with the 100%. Let's jump back to the code and make some more changes. Okay, what about the border? The border is 5 pixels at the moment. We can change it to, let's say, 50. Let's try 50. I'm saving the file and jumping back to the HTML page. I'm going to refresh the page. You can see the border around the text is now 50 pixels and it's really too much for our design. So let's jump back to the code and make some more changes. So let's make some changes to the border color. Right now we have this color and let's change it to bluish type of color. So we'll choose that part of the blue and we'll save the file and we jump back to the HTML page. Now let's refresh our page. The border color has been changed to blue. Now let's jump back to our code. Now right at the bottom, we also declared another body for our background color, padding left and padding right. We're going to make some changes to our background color, changing it from yellowish color to a light green color. Let's save our file and jump back to our HTML page. Now let's refresh our page. You can see it has changed. Let's jump back to our code. We're going to make changes to our padding left and our padding right. For our padding left, let's call it 10. And for our padding right, let's call it 500. I'm going to save the file and jump back to the HTML page. Now I'm going to refresh the page. So you can see that padding left was 10 pixels while the padding right was 500 pixels. So this distance is 500 pixels padding to the right. So definitely 500 pixels padding to the right is not suitable for our design. So let's jump back to the code and return it to the original pixels. So right now I've returned it to original pixels and I've saved the file and I jump back to the HTML page. I'm going to refresh the page for you to see. So now we have 50 pixels on the left. We also have 50 pixels on the right. Let's jump back to the code and make some more changes. So finally, within the style, we made another body selector declaration just for the font. So for the font, we gave it 14 pixels and the font family is Arial Sans Serif. So at the moment, we can change it from 14 to 100. And let's save the file and jump back to the HTML page. Let's refresh the page. You can see the font has changed from 14 to 100. I'm just going to zoom out for you to see how it looks like. But if I zoom back to the original size, we can see the font size appears too large for our design. So let's jump back to the code. Let's go further down to the body and see how we can make use of everything we've declared right within the style. So first of all, we're making use of the container. Remember the container, that's where we had our text displayed. We have this text and we have this text. The container was divided into two, where we have this text and this text.